The Living Tribunal returns in Marvel Comics, and it's amazing. But before we get to that, we get a massive revelation with regards to gods. So what this does is this picks up with a woman who's addressing what she calls her children. And as always, for those of you guys who need to get caught up, you'll find a link to the playlist at the end of this. The cool thing is a lot of this is standalone, so you don't really have to understand a whole lot of what's been happening to grasp this. But these women are not really her children. She just kind of calls them that, or maybe they are. It's a little ambiguous here. But they ask her to read them a bedtime story, which she agrees to do. Now, what she does as she tells this story is she says, "Once upon a time, there was a man. He was a traveler from a distant land. He had wandered for days. His journey was hard. His shoes were worn, for he had walked quite far. The villagers had never seen his kind before. They fussed and questioned, and about him learned more. Then, when they had fed him and bed him and gotten all they could got, the women of the village cooked him up in a pot." Now, here's the thing. This is referring to one of two things. Either what we'll talk about here in a second regarding what this nurse is doing with different men that come across their path, which is pretty twisted, or, and what's most likely going on here, it's referring to Doctor Doom. Now, here's why I pull the Doctor Doom card out, right? Because these little girls are like, "Tell us another story. What did he taste like?" All that kind of stuff. And she's like, "No, I told you one story. It's time for bed. Good night, my beautiful swans." These are the Black Swans, or at least children versions of the Black Swans. Now, it's a little bit murky here, right? Because the Black Swans were just this really ambiguous thing in Marvel that was never fully explored, but was one of the most amazing concepts ever. So the idea behind the Black Swans, for those of you guys who are unfamiliar with this, is that in Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, in effect, Doctor Doom and the Molecule Man had learned that the Beyonders wanted to wipe out the entirety of the multiverse, hence the basis behind the incursions, that the Beyonders were going to do this by basically putting a Molecule Man in every universe and then blowing them all up at the same time because the Molecule Man's powerful enough to wipe out a universe. Doctor Doom and the main Marvel Universe Molecule Man went to an alternate reality and killed that version of the Molecule Man. That in turn blew his universe up, which is what started the incursions. But the deaths of the Molecule Men had to happen in order to stop the plan of the Beyonders. So what Doctor Doom did is, while he was traveling and killing all these different Molecule Men, he also started assembling an army of basically women, the Black Swans, and they had kind of double duty. One part was helping him locate Molecule Men and then kill them. The other one was trying to slow down the incursions, which is how we were initially introduced to the main Black Swan, a woman by the name of Yabbit. But the fact remains here, they had been missing ever since Secret Wars. With the exception of like the Black Swan chick, we had no idea whatever happened to them. We don't know if they were destroyed or what. They're alive and well, ladies and gents, and in fact, what they're doing here involves the Black Priest, which is really, really cool. So the way this works is when this woman gets to the clinic, right, this kind of hospital that she works at, she asks the question, "How many tonight?" Right? This woman says only one so far. And it's like, "Just one?" And she says, "Yep, and I don't think he even qualifies. We're going to need to change things up soon. Almost 4.5 million men live here. We could simply cast a wider net. But the concern here is that it could be risky. It could have a serious cost. The cost, of course, that they would get caught." Now, you'll see what I'm talking about here in a minute, because what this woman does is she goes into the room where this guy's at, and she has literally a violin case with her, right? A guitar case, whatever you want to call it, sits it down in front of him, asks him a handful of questions, and then says, "What you're going to do is you're going to open this up, and you're going to look inside of it. Then you're going to write down what you see." And that's it. This guy's getting paid to do it, right? He just answered some random, classified ad, right? And so literally once he opens it up, he's kind of just flabbergasted. His mind is blown, like John Travolta in Pulp Fiction, right? Looking into the briefcase of Marcellus Wallace, which has Marcellus's soul. In this instance, this guy just writes down what he sees, and then she cracks him over the head with a hammer. Following that, this just kind of old door opens, and this eldritch creature enters in and pulls this guy into the ether, never to be seen or heard from again. So it's kind of messed up, because what they do as this happens is you end up finding out they're assembling an alphabet, right? A kind of language of sorts. Now, here's why I say this involves a Black Priest. It is a little bit of speculation, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. For those of you guys who don't know about the Black Priest in Marvel, that again was from Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers. They were a kind of antibody for the multiverse, kind of a defense mechanism that the multiverse sent out into itself to try to fight whatever forces were causing the incursions. The idea behind the Black Priest is this. If I sit down and I say skyscraper, you know exactly what that is. I'm referring to a skyscraper, but I say that because it's all the letters that have been arranged to spell the word skyscraper. Black priests don't work that way. One priest says the letter S, another priest says the letter K, so on and so forth until the whole word is said. But each letter has its own power. And so instead of like one Black priest showing up and then like using their power to wipe out a whole planet or something like that, an army of them have to descend and they all have to speak together in order to achieve that. But if a person is able to decipher and use the language of the Black priest, they become astronomically powerful. We saw that when Doctor Strange was able to decipher the entire alphabet in Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers. It was towards the end, but still, he attained like this whole new level of power. It's what the Black Swans are trying to do and have been trying to do for quite some time. And so what we do here is we switch over to Winn alongside Mia. Now, of course, Winn is again kind of Marvel Comics John Constantine from DC at this point in time. But he represents the powers that be, because keep in mind, in terms of gods, we know nothing about them, but you have the powers that be and the natural order of things, right? The Centaurs, the ones who were in all white, they represent the natural order of things. And of course, guys like Jason Wynn represent the powers that be. Mia is kind of a proxy, and we'll learn a lot about her in this, because what happens is she basically meets with Winn, and he kind of agrees to train her a little bit. Winn is incredibly powerful. He's not Doctor Strange level powerful, but he's also very, very experienced, much older than Stephen Strange is by like several thousand years. And so he kind of teaches her to harness this ambient magical energy that she's capable of that she never really knew she had. But because she had been brought in to the natural order of things by Aiko, that the idea was that she would become one of their ranks, a centaur, kind of a higher ranking member of the cast. The news that's broken to her by Winn is just kind of like, that's not really going to happen. But he doesn't tell her that right off the bat. Instead, he takes her to the clinic where the Black Swans are. And what happens is he sends her in there with what is kind of like a magical search warrant, right? Like, you have something that was stolen, you need to give that back. Otherwise, all hell's gonna break loose. The important thing to know is the Black Swans are basically operating under the radar. They can't risk any of the higher powers out there with regards to magic being aware of what it is that they're doing, any of the higher level cosmic entities or even the relatively lower ones, because there's rules that have been established here. We don't really know what they are, but everybody does things according to a kind of credence or rule or what have you. You stay away, we stay away, that sort of thing. And so when Mia shows in there, she basically brings this kind of magical search warrant to the nurse herself. And we end up finding out that like Wynn's assistant, Dimitri, was the guy who was effectively kidnapped, but he had brought the little artifact that was supposed to allow Oblivion, the cosmic entity that represents the end of everything. Don't worry, we'll see more of him in this video, because it gets nuts. They're effectively treating the kind of vault where these souls are whisked away. They're treating it as a kind of lockbox, right? To keep it hidden away so nobody can ever access it. What happens though is these Black Swans, like most individuals out there in the magical community, say, we won't just give you a thing. You have to be willing to trade for it. Do you have something that you can offer us that would give us reason to give you what it is that you're looking for, to give you Dimitri? And so what she does, right, what Mia does is she looks at the board, this kind of language cipher that the Black Swans have been putting together. And she's like, I can't read it because it's incomplete, but I can tell you what it's missing, which is exactly what they need. Because at this point, they're just kind of grasping at straws, right? They just lure these guys in who decipher it, and they don't really know exactly what they're looking for until some guy shows up who, you know, writes down what he sees, which happens to be one of the letters, and like, that's it. But in effect, she tells them, you're missing 62 letters. And that's it, right? Like, go out, find them, whatever it is that you need to do. It's not really of a concern to Wynn or any of those guys. They have much bigger fish to fry, which we'll see later on in this video here. But ultimately, you end up having Wynn and Dimitri and Mia who leave. But Wynn gives them a warning. When the nurse says thank you, right, Wynn says, oh, so like we're all friends now, right? Bygones and all that? I don't think so. You've had the sugar, now here's the salt. No one ever explicitly said that there are rules, but we all know that in fact there are. We let it slide because for a long while you've stuck to gathering up the failed, the forgotten, and the truly fallen. But this time you did not. Do it again, and you'll find yourself wishing for the good old days of total annihilation and Raboom Alal. Do we understand one another? And he ultimately leaves. But the idea here is gathering up people who have just kind of been goofing off and people who are corrupt or screwed up and ridding the world of these heinous criminals. Sure, nobody's going to bat an eye about that. But when you start kidnapping members of the powers that be or the natural order of things or what have you, then you start breaking rules. That's a problem, right? Like that's literally what you're looking at. So the Black Swans are by no means major players, but they will be because it's Jonathan Hickman. He never does anything small, right? Everything becomes important later. But for the character of Mia, and the reason why I said this is so important here is because with her being a proxy for the natural order of things, right? For Aiko, because she was brought in and wasn't officially made a member, she will never actually become a full-on capable version of the natural order of things, meaning she'll never achieve the highest levels of power. She'll always just kind of be somebody out there who's doing a thing, right? Just kind of helping them achieve some goal or something along those lines. The reason why this matters is because as a proxy of the natural order of things, because she'll never really be one of their own, she's not kind of part of the inner circle, that would give her the opportunity to go to Wynn, right? And to say, okay, well, make me part of your group and I could achieve these crazy levels of power there instead of doing it with the natural order of things. His response, that's never going to happen because now you've been part of the Centum and it's a civil war here, right? We're kind of at a ceasefire at the moment, but the powers that be will never bring you in, right? They'll never allow you to be one of their own, which means you can never get to where I am. So you can't achieve the full totality of your power with the natural order of things, and you can't do it with the powers that be. You'll never be anything more than you are right now. But that is actually going to change drastically because what we end up doing is picking up with Aiko. Now, what ends up going on here is Aiko really kind of feels guilt over what she's done here, right? She's effectively made it so that Mia will never be anything better than what she is right now, despite filling her head with the idea that she can be wildly capable and super powerful. So what ends up happening is Aiko goes to what's called the Covenant, basically a place where you have a couple of people that hang out. These are names that you may be familiar with. We have Nimue Delak, and we have the Lion. Now, for those of you guys who don't remember back to issue number 1, and again, the playlist will be there for you guys to check out. You're only maybe 4 or 5 videos behind, so it's not too bad. These were guys, or basically kind of these demon figures, more or less, who feed on like the souls of the corrupt, right? But the fact is, they can get you to where you need to go, but you can do it under the radar, right? You can do it with unofficial channels. So think of them as kind of like pirates to a degree, right? Making their way through the world and operating under the current and manipulating magic and killing people and all that kind of stuff. The reason why this is important is because what Aiko tells them is, I did a thing that I am ashamed of, and I need to see the person that can fix it for me. I've researched it. I know they can do that. I need you to take me to see the living tribunal. Now, immediately, Nimue Delak is just like, nope, that's not going to happen. I am not taking you to see the living tribunal. I'm not getting caught up in that, right? That's just higher levels of power. I am not looking at drawing that kind of attention to myself, right? This is like going to criminals and saying, I need you to take me to the police station. Like, are you out of your mind? That's never going to happen. The Lion, however, is wildly interested. Now, here's where things get super cool here. What ends up happening is they wait for a kind of mode of transport, right, that arrives there. And it literally comes by way of a carriage. Now, this carriage can only take them as far as what's called the river, presumably the river Styx, but we don't definitively know if that's the case. But when they get to this river, we end up having this person who shows up. Now, of course, you have like the head of Anubis and so on, which is why I say it looks like it's the river Styx. But basically, taking this river will get them to the other side, which you and I might call the far shore or whatever the case is, but basically the realm of the living tribunal. Now, things are going to get nuts here in a minute, because not only are they going to go see the living tribunal, they're actually going to go see the cosmic entity Oblivion, right? Which is, I'm telling you guys, it's amazing. But what happens is this person says the Lion of Wolves passage on this vessel has already been paid for now and all time. But your Centaur has not. No money, no favor, or honest exchange will do. If you want on this boat and down this river, it will cost you either your left eye or nothing but the truth for one turning of the world. And so she says, so I cannot lie for 24 hours, or I have to pluck out my actual eye and give it to you. What kind of choice is this? I'll obviously take it. Now, that's where the lion stops her, and he says, hold on. There's something you should consider before you answer. This will not be the last choice that you have to make tonight. And while this choice may seem like the obvious one, it could put you in greater peril later on. And where you have Aiko who's like, I don't really see how, the lion says, as I've said, this is not the soft world of logic or science, dear lady. You are bound to each choice as if they were etched in your bones. Hours from now, far down this road, if one of your choices is between something truly awful and having to do nothing but lie for the next day, then you will have to choose the former. Otherwise, your very being will be in conflict with your perfect mind, and it will shatter. You will pull out your hair and swallow your teeth as madness sets in. Do you understand? Now, here's the thing, right? You're dealing with the world of magic here, right? The Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange, Clea, Jericho Drum, that whole thing. So basically, when he's saying you will go mad, it means she will lose herself, right? She will literally go insane, and her mind will be destroyed in the process. So unless she wants to spend the rest of eternity in agonizing pain, slowly losing her mind and any semblance of self, she needs to be careful of the choices that she's making. But she asks this really important question: will those we meet on the road ahead know of my previous choices? The lion says they will not. And she says, well then for now, I choose to keep both eyes, as I have great fondness for them, and because no one should fear the truth. And so what they do is they set on this path, right? And so it went, choices were made. For the key to the third door, Aiko's choice was between a secret no one knew and 2 of her back teeth. For a flame to light her way through a pit of blindness, Aiko chose to surrender the smallest taste of blood in lieu of the maiming of an innocent. And for the path to the great rock, the choice was between the loss of 1 year of her life or 1 year of a stranger's. Now finally, they get to their destination, to where the living tribunal is. And what they end up doing is meeting the tribunal's emissary, right? Literally, Aiko meets this woman and says, what do you want? And she says, from you, I have nothing but courtesy for one who's my equal in standing. And she says, you are the Centaur of the natural order of things. Basically, it's representative here in this area. I am the preordained, of an equal station to yours for my masters, Oblivion and the Living Tribunal. That's an important statement, because what Hickman's going to establish here is the Living Tribunal and Oblivion are equal in power, which is something we've never seen before. We've never seen an instance in Marvel Comics where it's been officially stated that the Tribunal and Oblivion are equal. Right? It makes perfect sense given the power of Oblivion and what he stands for, basically remaining when everything else has been destroyed, because he represents the absence of existence. But the response of Aiko here is, cool, I need to see the tribunal. And when the question is asked, and you, Wolf, why are you here? He says, to illuminate the path, to show the way, to be helpful in any manner that I can. And the response of the preordained, of course you are, right? She knows he's duplicitous. She knows there's a reason why he's here, and it certainly has nothing good to do with anything. So once they end up being taken to where the tribunal's at, you end up having all these people who are here. Everybody who's here, all these individuals who have been waiting years, eons, multitudes of lifetimes. And when the question's asked, like, why are they here? Like, do I have to wait with them? The response is, no, you do not need to wait in line like they do. You literally get to cut in line, which is exactly what happens. And she's brought to the living tribunal. And the statement here that's made, right? It said, you see that wall. There, the wall that divides them, the word hate is reserved to describe the relationship between your masters and the powers that be, but mine, whose temperaments are less red hot, of course referring to Oblivion and Living Tribunal. They are still directly hostile to one another, so the wall is as much a personal divide as ideological. They refuse to speak to one another. If one dared to laugh at gods, this would give good reason, as while Oblivion is the manifestation of end-of-times nihilism and the Living Tribunal represents irrevocable judgment and justice, both equally represent unyielding forces of finality. I suppose then, one might say, they are too much alike to ever find peace. And she says, I suppose now, we'll see what they make of you. And so you have Aiko, who's able to plead her case directly to the tribunal. Now, have no illusions here. Despite the fact that she's here and communicating with this thing, this is seemingly the Living Tribunal's true form. And that's an important distinction here. Marvel's never really come out and said that, like, the dimension of manifestations doesn't really exist anymore. And if you don't know what that is, it's not overly important. We'll talk about that once we get to the end of the story. But for right now, she tells the tribunal, forgive me, but I'm just here for the tribunal. And to be clear to both of you, I'm not here in any official capacity. This is personal. The response of the tribunal, I will hear what she has to say and judge it accordingly. Now, here's a very important thing that Aiko is told. It's best to be straightforward and be honest. They will know if you lie. In deceit, omission, or self-immolation, they will know. And so immediately she spills the truth and nothing but the truth. I am a prime centaur. We lost our numbers in the recent Babylon event on Earth. As such, our master commanded us to recruit minions, and so I did. And while I did know that this would have a cost for her, the loss of her ability to fall under the grace of her rightful God, I rationalized this. I convinced myself that it was for a higher purpose, of course referring to Mia here. And she says, but I have come to know this person well. I care for her deeply, and the idea that I have stolen some piece of her future is unacceptable to me. And I also think it should be unacceptable in general, to the universe itself. I ask you to undo what I have done, to judge the act as an affront and erase it from ever having occurred. The response of the tribunal, you think I have this power? And Aiko responds and says, I checked. I know you do. You've done it several times, twice to my masters. The response of the tribunal, you know nothing. You think that justice is erasing your sin. It is not. Justice is making you pay for what you have done. True justice is making an example of you so that others fear doing the same. But there is an order to this universe, and you belong to one who sits on the same axis as we, and wishing to not cause unnecessary ripples in that water, I will leave you as you were on arrival, guilty and haunted by what you have done. Now, here's the other big revelation here. Despite the fact that we know virtually nothing about the powers that be and the natural order of things, seemingly they're on an even keel to the Living Tribunal and Oblivion. So this is a total reshuffling of the Marvel godly landscape. Oblivion was just a cosmic entity that was out there, and we never really knew its relation to the other cosmic entities outside of the fact that it was like a sibling to eternity. But its power seemed to exceed the power of eternity, so it was murky at best. The Living Tribunal was probably the most clear-cut, right? The judge of the multiverse, the ability to wipe out whole universes, all kinds of crazy stuff. If the theories out there are correct, that the natural order of things is master order, and the powers that be is Lord Chaos, that in effect, Lord Chaos, Master Order, Oblivion, and the Living Tribunal are these 4 cosmic entities that are all on an even keel with each other. It's crazy and it's a little murky, but it is interesting because at that moment, Oblivion manifests, right? And Oblivion says, that smell, it lingers. Why does it linger? Tell my brother, I have my own judgment to pass. And the response of the tribunal, tell my brother, I am done here and care nothing for what he wants. And he ultimately just leaves. Now, this is where Oblivion asks the question, why do you smell familiar? And that in turn is when Aiko says, because we've met before, or at least I was in your presence when you initially tried to wipe out all of creation, right? We saw that a couple videos ago in the G.O.D.S storyline. She was just kind of there. Now, what's really interesting is he says, okay, I am not my brother, so I cannot undo what you have done, but I can make it right. I can make Mia whole. Then the response of Aiko is, then I will do whatever it takes. And the response of Oblivion is, hear it all before you agree, because what he says here is huge. I can smell what's coming, and you will pay for what you have done. But the girl, empowered through another hand, will also fall under a different shadow. And when the question's asked by Aiko whose shadow that will be, the response of Oblivion is mine. And she says, I can't do that. Now, here's what's really interesting here, is he says, some world you live in thinking someone like me I would ever answer to you, it's already done. All that's left is you living with it. I know you're afraid. I can smell it on you. Well, let me tell you something. Do not fear for what you've done or the cost of it. No, fear what's coming. So in effect, there is a massive conflict coming down the pipe that involves seemingly all the cosmic entities and everything that could lay waste to all of creation. But more so than that, what Oblivion has basically established here is that Mia is going to become his avatar in the same way that Null the Symbiote God or the Chaos King or any of those other facsimiles that have shown up to basically hearken the ending of all things across the universe and potentially even the multiverse. That will become Mia, and she may very well be the source of it all. But in effect, because of the deal that's been struck here, the actions of Aiko even showing up here and initiating this in the first place, the fate of Mia is sealed. There's nothing that can be done. And so what you have is Aiko who emerges with the lion. And she's like, I did my best. I had the best of intentions. I hope it was enough. I am grateful that it's over with. The response of the lion, not quite. And where Aiko asks the question, what do you mean? He says, there is the small matter left of what you owe me. And so what he tells her is, I want both of your eyes. And she's like, why would I give you both of my eyes? Like, what happens if I don't? And he says, you can do nothing but lie for the next 24 hours. It's a great way to pull the rug out from under her because she has to sacrifice her eyes. Otherwise, she's going to go insane. And so what ends up happening is that she ends up meeting back up with Mia after the beans were spilled, right? By Wen, who told her her true fate, that she was a minion, right? She's just kind of a third party now. She'll never be part of the natural order of things. She'll never be part of the powers that be. She'll just be someone out there who's just doing small time stuff, right? Mia, of course, was pissed, told Aiko to leave and never come back. But again, the two of them kind of have a bit of a muse because as they have this conversation, the response of Mia is, she won't even speak to me. So I did it all for nothing. The response of Wen, no, she's better. You fix that. And so eventually she'll get over it. And you, the response of Aiko is, I did what I had to do, right? Like I paid what I had to. And so Wen asked this question, which really is kind of setting the tone for the stance that he and everybody will take when this giant cosmic entity war comes along. And he says, you ever wonder what it means that we work for gods who never pay the price for their actions, but people like you and I, their very special servants, are forced to live with the consequences of ours, and because of the power they give us, forced to do so for however long we can take it in our very long lives. I'm getting a little tired of that. What it sounds like is Wen, and really even Aiko herself, most likely with other members of the magical community, are pondering the idea of revolting and destroying the cosmic entities, which would be crazy if that happened. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Let me know what you think down in the comments section, and I will catch you all later. Peace.